Hello everyone, this is AndresRestart, and today we are talking about how we just got some really interesting nuggets from GDC 2026, the Game Developers Conference. Nintendo had a segment about the development of Donkey Kong Bananza, and the producer and senior director of Donkey Kong Bananza, Kenta Motokura, took many questions and had some really interesting answers. Some answers pertain to the future of Donkey Kong, like the future of 3D Donkey Kong, but then another has to do with the future of 3D Mario. And a lot of us have been thinking that 3D Mario could be coming out for this holiday, especially with Pokemon Winds and Waves not slated until 2027. So what did Motokura say? What does this all suggest? That's what we're getting into today. Now, here's a quick reminder, I have this goal to reach 60,000 subscribers, so if you find yourself enjoying my videos and you haven't subscribed already, you subscribing would be very much appreciated, and liking and commenting would certainly help too. But getting into what was said about the future of Donkey Kong here, Kenta Motokura stated, "For me, being able to see people have fun once again with the character of Donkey Kong helps me communicate the potential for that character. I have a sense of relief knowing that's something that people can enjoy in the future as well. Unfortunately, I can't talk about any specifics of future plans at this time." At face value, this might not seem like much, but there's actually several hints here towards the future of Donkey Kong. When he's talking about helping to communicate the potential for that character, potential as in there's more, or having a sense of relief knowing that it's something that people can enjoy in the future as well, suggesting that there's more to enjoy in the future, but also stating he has nothing he can say right now about specific plans for the future. That's kind of like a no comment kind of thing, in a scenario where he could suggest it might be a long time, and he's not saying that. And I find all of this very interesting, because a few weeks ago I did put out a video talking about the future of 3D Donkey Kong, and ultimately that discussion was about how Donkey Kong Bananza seems to be just the beginning. We go back to how we heard about this game years in the past from rumors that have now proven to be very reliable, talking about the Odyssey team working on a Donkey Kong game. But those rumors also suggested that this project would be a split off from the main 3D Mario team. In other words, yes, members from the Odyssey team are working on Donkey Kong Bananza, as Nintendo has stated that it's made by the Odyssey team, but what actually is going on here is that you have two different groups here. One working on Donkey Kong, another working on 3D Mario. That's the implication of the rumor that has mostly been confirmed by the announcement and release of Donkey Kong Bananza. But also, as we've mentioned several times in the past, if you look at the credits for Donkey Kong Bananza, there are several key members from the Mario Odyssey team that are not in Bananza, such as the GOAT, Yoshiaki Koizumi. Like, these are the games that Koizumi has worked on. He's still helping out with even recent projects, and he's even still getting special thanks for different games such as Fire Emblem Shadows last year. And what's super interesting about this is that you would think Koizumi, who's so close to the Mario team because he works with the Mario team in making Mario games, and is even the one who has suggested that they make a Donkey Kong title, the fact that he doesn't even have a special thanks and that he's not involved with the credits here does suggest he's hard at work at something else. And he's just one of several. Point being, all the evidence points to that there are two different teams here. One that's still working on 3D Mario, yes, but another that's been formed to make Donkey Kong. And that's super interesting, because it implies that Donkey Kong Bananza is just the beginning. There will be more. And what's said by Motokura here further supports that. I mean, when we think about how Nintendo took the time to redesign Donkey Kong, put him in the first Mario movie that came out in 2023, have this grand expansion to Super Nintendo World, the first being for Donkey Kong Country, and then having one of their premier titles for the launch of the Switch 2 be Donkey Kong Bananza, the first new 3D Donkey Kong game in decades, I think that suggests that Nintendo is definitely making for a huge push here to revitalize the IP, the brand image of Donkey Kong, and I don't think it's supposed to stop here. That doesn't make sense. The idea would be to continue and rely upon Donkey Kong to be something that can appeal to a growing audience and, yes, lead to sales, which would be good for business. And we also understand that Nintendo is working on expanding so they can have more teams working on different games to help deal with the rising cost and lengths of development. So turning the team that made Mario Odyssey into a developer that can make 3D Mario and 3D Donkey Kong, two different teams that perhaps will communicate with each other, but two separate teams here, so they can work on both series at the same time and not have to wait decades or 8 years for every other entry. That makes the most business sense, and that's what it seems like all the evidence is pointing to. So yes, these recent statements from Motokura further strengthen my belief that there is a dedicated team working on Donkey Kong, and Bananza is just the beginning. There may even be another 3D Donkey Kong entry before the end of the Switch 2 era. And another little nugget I'll throw out there, we've already seen that both Nintendo and Universal have already officially filed for a copyright for a Donkey Kong motion picture. So these plans clearly are continuing here. Donkey Kong is not done. But there's something else said by Kenta Motokura that I want to focus on for this video that does pertain to 3D Mario. Probably we'll see the same sort of phenomenon as we did when going from Super Mario Odyssey to Donkey Kong Bonanza, where there were some ideas and development that acted as hints for the future development of Donkey Kong Bonanza. I do expect that will be the case where some ideas from Donkey Kong Bonanza provide future hints for our next project as well. So there are various ways to interpret what's being said here. I've noticed some people online are taking this to mean that Motokura is implying that the development for the next 3D Mario just started. Which I don't really think makes much sense at all, because the hints would happen throughout the development process. Donkey Kong already came out. They wouldn't be getting these hints now, it would be throughout the development process, and Nintendo's already told us officially that they were developing this game early on into the Switch 1 era. In other words, they've been tinkering with Donkey Kong for 7 to 8 years. Yes, in 2021 they transitioned over to getting the game work on Switch 2, but even still, it has been several years that they've been working on Donkey Kong, and whatever they figure out or whatever sort of ideas they see throughout Donkey Kong development, yeah, those ideas could trickle over into another project. It's made mention that ideas in Mario Odyssey trickled into Donkey Kong Bonanza. Donkey Kong Bonanza is built around voxels, 3D pixels, which leads to the incredible amounts of destruction and how you can interact with the environment. This technology Nintendo is already playing around with in Super Mario Odyssey. So Nintendo already started experimenting with 3D voxels in Mario Odyssey and then greatly expanded upon it for Bonanza. And so Motokura here is actually saying that there's something about the development of Bonanza he expects could also provide hints for their next project. Which actually brings us to another possible interpretation here. We were just talking about how it seems like, from everything we've come to understand, that there's actually two teams here. So, is Motokura talking about the next project for the team that works on Donkey Kong? The next project just as coming from that overall EPD group, which would likely be 3D Mario? There is some room for interpretation there. But let's say for whatever reason, you do not agree with what I'm getting at here, that everything we've seen up to this point suggests that there are actually two different teams here working on Mario and Donkey Kong. Then you would have to interpret this to mean that their next project would be for the next 3D Mario. So then we could take a look at Bonanza and consider the possibilities of what that would mean. Or you do agree that it does seem like there are two different teams here, which would mean they've been working on 3D Mario for a long time and it would be coming out soon, and so we're going to see something soon about that regardless. And I think something else that's fair to say here is that even if they have two different teams, that doesn't mean there isn't crossover. That doesn't mean they don't exchange ideas. There are a lot of ideas and concepts that are exchanged and passed around within the different Nintendo developing teams. And if teams from the Mario Odyssey team split off into two, clearly there would be a lot of closeness there, right? If you play through Donkey Kong Bonanza, it's obvious that it has a lot of roots in Mario Odyssey. So I still think it's fair to look at Bonanza and consider what that may imply for the future of Mario. And also just considering what Kenta Motokura has been working on, because before Donkey Kong Bonanza, it was Bowser's Fury. Which brings me to another video I made a few weeks ago talking about the possibility of 3D Mario not quite being open world, but Nintendo doing something a little bit different. You look at how Nintendo handled Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, They went for the open air, changing their definition of how you go about making an open world game. Well, what if they want to do that again with Mario? They don't want to make just another open world game, but something different. The idea I proposed in this video, I somewhat came to that conclusion by looking at what was accomplished with both Bowser's Fury and Donkey Kong Bonanza. Bowser's Fury has an expanding world that is open, which shows that the trajectory of Mario development is becoming more and more open, especially when you consider that they plugged in Bowser's Fury into 3D World, one of the most linear Mario games ever, showing that Nintendo felt that putting an open world Mario experience made more sense than just adding more similar content to 3D World. But then you also look at Donkey Kong Bonanza. Donkey Kong Bonanza is not an open world game, but it has these giant openish sandboxes that have a seamless transition to the next area where you dive into these holes that connect into the next world. And so perhaps Nintendo is building upon these ideas for the next Mario game. And the idea I proposed in my prior video, it's a theory, keep that in mind. So that means it may not actually be what's going to happen, but maybe there's something to it, is that perhaps the next Mario game, it's not so much like a Mario Galaxy 3, but you're exploring these kingdom-sized planets. So they're such large planets that they feel like levels in a Donkey Kong Bonanza or a larger Mario Odyssey, but there isn't necessarily a loading screen between these kingdom-sized planets, but eventually you find a way to travel to that next planet and you can see that in the sky above you. In other words, it's like an open world space, like an open world galaxy, with again, giant kingdom-sized planets. That's an idea, a theory. They may not go exactly in that direction, but I do think when you look at the development of Bonanza and you look at the development of Bowser's Fury, they are considering interesting ways to go about exploring a vast world. But let's also talk about the voxels, because the voxels and what Nintendo's been able to make of them is a little bit of the star of the show at GDC. Nintendo was even playing around with voxels in Mario Odyssey, and considering everything that they figured out for Donkey Kong Bonanza, I don't think they should just be done with voxels, but I think in a Mario game, it wouldn't be the star of the show, but maybe they'll rely on voxels just a little bit more than what they did with Mario Odyssey, which was a very, very small percentage of a level or two. I think it's really cool how they were able to make such a beautiful looking game with Bonanza, and pretty much 95-98% of the environments are fully destructible. Like, by design, they created environments that look like you wouldn't be able to destroy them, where you can destroy them. In a 3D Mario game, I do think they need to have a little bit more physical limitations. I don't think Mario should be able to just destroy everything around him. But instead of 90+% of the world being destructible like in Donkey Kong, maybe it's like 10 to 20%, so there's a lot more interesting things you can do where it would make sense, which I think would add to the immersion and just give us a lot more gameplay possibilities as well. But could there be something else about Donkey Kong Bonanza that they might be building upon for the next Mario? Well, I look at the companion character, Pauline. Young Pauline is used as a character that handles most of the dialogue throughout the adventure, but since she travels alongside DK, maybe the idea behind this could also extend to Mario here. Now, what's interesting is that this idea of companion characters didn't start with Donkey Kong. We've been seeing companion characters in the last few Mario games. In Mario Galaxy, we had the Luma. In Mario Odyssey, we had Cappy. Now, I've been theorizing for some time that Yoshi will be playing a more significant role with this upcoming game. We see that Yoshi's playing a more significant role with the movie. Yes, there's a Yoshi game coming out, but I do feel like there's gotta be more here. And if we are talking about a more open, wider world to explore in 3D Mario, then why not incorporate Mario's primary initial mount, Yoshi, so you can explore around with more speed? They could do this, but at the same time, they can turn Yoshi into a companion character, where it's not always about necessarily riding around on Yoshi, but maybe traveling alongside Yoshi, where Yoshi can do his own things. Maybe we could even see some co-op gameplay there, where you can perhaps do a little bit more than your typical companion characters in both Donkey Kong and prior 3D Marios. That may be something else to keep in mind here for the future of 3D Mario. But what do you all think? What do you make of these latest comments from Kenta Motokura? What do you think it implies about the future of Donkey Kong and the future of Mario? Let me know in the comments below. This is AndresRestart. Thank you so much for listening and watching, and I will see you all really soon. Take care. Bye.